Control is one of the most deeply ingrained elements in the psyche of many men. It's been passed down through generations, woven into the fabric of societal expectations and relationships. For centuries, control has symbolized power, authority, and identity. When a man feels like he's in control, there's a sense of security, a sense of order in his world. But when that control is questioned, when it's challenged, or when it begins to slip away, it can feel like a personal threat, even if it's not. The truth is, control often masks deeper fears. Fears of inadequacy, fears of vulnerability, fears of losing relevance. It's no secret that society has long conditioned men to associate their worth with their ability to lead, provide, and protect. Men are taught to hold the reins tightly, to be the one who steers the ship. And this is not inherently bad. Leadership, protection, and provision are noble qualities. But when these concepts are rooted in a fear of losing power or dominance, they can turn into barriers that prevent true connection, growth, and equality. Now imagine what happens when a woman begins to realize her power. Not the kind of power that seeks to control or dominate, but the quiet, unshakable power that comes from self-awareness, independence, and confidence. That kind of power doesn't need external validation. It doesn't seek approval. It just is. And when a man sees that in a woman, it can feel like the ground beneath him is shifting. Why? Because it challenges the very framework of control that he's been taught to rely on. For some men, this realization can trigger a sense of insecurity. If a woman no longer needs him to lead, to protect, or to provide in the traditional sense, what's his role? If she's capable of standing on her own, where does he fit in? These are uncomfortable questions, but they're important ones. They force men to reevaluate their understanding of relationships, partnership, and their own self-worth. Unfortunately, instead of confronting these questions head-on, some men react defensively. They might try to reassert control in subtle or overt ways, through criticism, manipulation, or even withdrawal. This isn't because they're inherently bad or malicious, it's because they're scared. They're scared of losing their place in a world that's evolving, of being left behind as women step into their full potential. But here's the thing, control is an illusion. The tighter you grip it, the more it slips through your fingers. True power doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from understanding yourself. And this is where many men miss the mark. Instead of seeing a woman's strength as a threat, they could see it as an invitation, a chance to grow, to evolve, and to build something greater together. A woman's realization of her power doesn't diminish a man's, it amplifies it if he's willing to rise to the occasion. When a woman figures this out, that she doesn't need to play small, that she doesn't need to shrink to make someone else feel comfortable, it's a revelation. She starts to recognize the subtle ways control has been wielded in her life, whether it's through societal expectations, relationships, or even her own doubts and fears. And once she sees it, she can't unsee it. She begins to take back her narrative, to live on her terms, and to demand the respect and equality she deserves. This shift can be unsettling for some men, especially those who are used to operating within the old framework. But it's also an opportunity, a wake-up call to grow beyond outdated notions of control and embrace a more balanced, equitable dynamic. The fear of losing control, at its core, is the fear of change. Change is uncomfortable, unpredictable, and often messy. But it's also necessary. Just as women are stepping into their power, men have the chance to step into theirs. Not the kind of power that comes from control, but the kind that comes from collaboration, mutual respect, and shared growth. This requires vulnerability, self-reflection, and a willingness to let go of old paradigms. It's not easy, but it's worth it. When men and women learn to stand side by side, neither trying to control the other but instead lifting each other up, that's where true power lies. It's not about one person leading and the other following. It's about walking together, each bringing their unique strengths to the table. And that kind of partnership, built on trust, respect, and equality, is far more powerful than any illusion of control could ever be. So while some men may fear losing control, the truth is they're not losing anything at all. They're gaining the opportunity to grow, to evolve, and to build deeper, more meaningful connections. And that's something worth embracing. Emotional intelligence is one of the most powerful yet underestimated abilities a person can possess. For a long time, it has been brushed aside in favor of traits like logic, strength, and decisiveness, qualities traditionally associated with success, particularly for men. However, emotional intelligence is a game changer, and when a woman begins to harness it, something remarkable happens. She gains a deeper understanding of herself, her relationships, and the dynamics that govern her world. It's a realization that can shift the balance in ways that some men find unsettling. At its core, emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage one's emotions while also being attuned to the emotions of others. Women often have a natural capacity for this, thanks in part to social conditioning that encourages empathy and emotional awareness. But when a woman truly leans into this ability, when she sharpens it and uses it to navigate life, it becomes a form of power that's hard to challenge. When sleeping, for many men, emotions are a minefield. Society tells them from a young age to suppress feelings, to avoid vulnerability, and to view emotions as weaknesses. They're taught to prioritize stoicism, strength, and action, leaving little room for introspection or emotional growth. As a result, emotions become something to fear or ignore, creating a disconnect between what they feel and how they act. This is where the power of emotional intelligence in women becomes so impactful. It highlights what's been missing. When a woman understands emotional intelligence, she doesn't just react to the world around her. She reads it. She picks up on subtle cues, notices inconsistencies, and senses what others may try to hide. She becomes adept at interpreting tone, body language, and unspoken words. This skill can be disarming to men who aren't comfortable with emotional transparency. A woman who sees through the bravado, the silence, or the avoidance forces a man to confront parts of himself he might not be ready to face. This awareness also gives women a significant advantage in relationships and communication. A woman with emotional intelligence can navigate difficult conversations with grace, knowing when to push and when to step back. She can identify manipulation or dishonesty, not because she's suspicious, but because she understands human behavior on a deeper level. This makes it harder for anyone to take advantage of her or dismiss her feelings. It also shifts the dynamic in relationships as she begins to demand honesty, vulnerability, and emotional reciprocity. The challenge for some men is that emotional intelligence dismantles traditional power dynamics. For generations, men have been positioned as the rational, logical ones, while women were cast as overly emotional or irrational. When a woman steps into her emotional intelligence, she disrupts this narrative. She proves that emotions are not weaknesses, but strengths, tools that can be used to connect, lead, and inspire. This can feel threatening to men who are unprepared to engage on this level, leading to defensiveness or resistance. But here's the deeper truth. Emotional intelligence isn't just a woman's strength, it's a human strength. When men begin to embrace their own emotional intelligence, they unlock a level of self-awareness and connection that enhances every aspect of their lives. They learn that vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, but a pathway to deeper relationships and personal growth. And in partnerships, when both people bring emotional intelligence to the table, the result is a bond built on understanding, trust, and mutual respect. For a woman, mastering emotional intelligence isn't about wielding it as a weapon or using it to manipulate. It's about creating a life that aligns with her values, boundaries, and desires. It's about recognizing when someone is trying to undermine her confidence and standing firm in her truth. It's about connecting with others in a way that's authentic and meaningful while protecting her energy and emotional well-being. Some men may resist this shift because it forces them to confront their own emotional shortcomings. It holds up a mirror to their fears, insecurities, and the ways they've been conditioned to avoid emotional depth. But for those who are willing to embrace the challenge, it's an opportunity to grow alongside the women in their lives, rather than feeling threatened by them. Scarcity. Emotional intelligence is not about competition, it's about collaboration. It's about creating a space where emotions are valued, respected, and understood. When women figure this out, they don't just enhance their own lives, they raise the emotional standard for everyone around them. And for men who are willing to rise to that standard, the possibilities are endless. Together, they can build relationships, families, and communities that thrive on connection, empathy, and shared growth. The secret of emotional intelligence isn't a secret at all. It's a tool, a skill, and a strength that's always been there, waiting to be discovered and embraced. And once a woman figures it out, the world around her will never be the same. Independence is one of the most empowering traits a person can cultivate. And when a woman steps fully into her independence, it creates a ripple effect that changes everything around her. Independence isn't just about financial freedom or the ability to make decisions without outside influence. It's a mindset, a way of being that signifies strength, self-reliance, and confidence. For many men, a woman's independence can be both alluring and intimidating, depending on how comfortable they are with their own identity. To understand why independence is so powerful, it's important to recognize what it represents. Independence means a woman knows her worth and isn't waiting for someone else to define it. She understands that her value isn't tied to her relationships, her marital status, or her ability to fit into traditional roles. Instead, her value comes from within: her intelligence, her resilience, her ability to navigate life on her terms. This kind of self-assurance is magnetic. It draws people in because it exudes a sense of security and purpose. For generations, women were taught to depend on others, particularly men, for their survival and success. This dependency wasn't necessarily born out of weakness, but rather out of societal structures that limited women's opportunities. They were expected to rely on men for financial stability, social status, and decision-making. But as women began to break free from these constraints, pursuing education, careers, and personal growth, the landscape started to shift. Women began to realize they didn't need to wait for permission to chase their dreams or create fulfilling lives. They could do it themselves. Number two, when a woman embraces her independence, she changes the dynamics of her relationships. She no longer enters partnerships out of necessity or fear of being alone. Instead, she chooses relationships based on mutual respect, love, and shared values. This shift can be unsettling for some men who are accustomed to traditional gender roles where they are the primary providers or decision makers. A woman who doesn't need a man but chooses to be with one challenges the narrative of dependency. It forces men to rethink their roles and step up in new ways. This doesn't mean that independent women don't value companionship or partnership. On the contrary, they deeply value meaningful connections. But their independence means they approach relationships differently. They aren't looking for someone to complete them. They're looking for someone to complement them. This distinction is crucial because it places the focus on partnership rather than dependency. An independent woman isn't afraid to set boundaries, speak her mind, or walk away from situations that don't align with her values. She knows that her happiness and success aren't tied to someone else's approval or presence in her life. For some men, this can be intimidating. Independence disrupts the traditional power dynamic where men held the majority of control in relationships. When a woman has her own career, her own financial resources, and her own sense of purpose, she levels the playing field. This requires men to engage with her as an equal, which can be a challenge for those who haven't embraced the idea of partnership over dominance. However, for men who are secure in themselves, a woman's independence is incredibly attractive. It signals that she knows what she wants, that she has her own ambitions, and that she won't settle for less than she deserves. Men who value growth and mutual respect recognize that an independent woman isn't a threat to their masculinity. She's an asset to their lives. She brings strength, wisdom, and perspective to the table, creating a partnership that is balanced and fulfilling. Independence also has a ripple effect beyond relationships. When a woman is independent, she inspires others to find their own strength. Her friends, colleagues, and even her children see her as a role model, someone who has overcome challenges and taken charge of her life. Her independence becomes a beacon of possibility, showing others that it's possible to break free from societal expectations and create a life that aligns with their true selves. But independence doesn't come without its challenges. It requires courage, perseverance, and a willingness to step into the unknown. For many women, the journey to independence involves unlearning years of conditioning that taught them to prioritize others' needs over their own. It means pushing past fear, doubt, and criticism to claim their power. It's not an easy path, but it's a rewarding one. In the end, independence is irresistible because it embodies freedom. It's the freedom to choose, to grow, to succeed, and to live authentically. When a woman embraces her independence, she doesn't just change her own life, she changes the world around her. She raises the standard for what's possible, not just for herself, but for everyone she encounters. Independence isn't just a personal triumph. It's a collective victory that paves the way for others to follow. A truly independent woman is a force to be reckoned with. She's not just surviving, she's thriving. And in doing so, she reminds everyone, men and women alike, that the greatest power lies in knowing who you are and having the courage to live it fully. That's the kind of strength that commands respect, admiration, and yes, even love. Independence isn't just irresistible, it's transformative. The word no is one of the simplest in any language, yet it holds immense power. It's a word of clarity, boundary setting, and self-respect. For many women, saying no hasn't always felt easy or accessible. Society often teaches women to prioritize the needs of others, to be agreeable, and to avoid confrontation. But when a woman realizes the true power of saying no, it transforms her life. It's not just about denying a request, it's about affirming her own worth, her time, and her values. Saying no is an act of self-preservation. It's a way of setting boundaries that protect a woman's energy, emotions, and priorities. In a world that often demands so much from women, whether in their careers, relationships, or families, the ability to say no becomes a tool for maintaining balance and mental health. It's a recognition that no one can give endlessly without replenishing themselves. By saying no, a woman acknowledges that her needs matter and that she cannot pour from an empty cup. For many women, the struggle with no begins early. They are taught to be accommodating, to avoid being labeled as difficult or selfish. They learn to say yes, even when they're overwhelmed, uncomfortable, or uninterested. This conditioning leads to a pattern of overcommitment, burnout, and resentment. But the moment a woman learns to push back and assert her right to decline, she reclaims her power. She steps out of the role of people pleaser and into the role of someone who values herself enough to prioritize her own well-being. Saying no is also a tool for clarity. It forces a woman to evaluate what truly matters to her. Each time she says no to something that doesn't align with her goals or values, she creates space for the things that do. It's not about being dismissive or unkind. It's about being intentional. Life is finite and time is precious. Every no to an unnecessary obligation is a yes to something more meaningful. Whether it's rest, a passion project, or time spent with loved ones. In relationships, the power of no is particularly profound. For too long, many women have felt pressure to say yes to maintain harmony, avoid conflict, or meet societal expectations. This can lead to a dynamic where their needs and desires are sidelined, creating imbalances in power and fulfillment. When a woman begins to assert herself by saying no, it shifts the dynamic. It shifts the dynamic. It forces those around her to see her as a person with agency and boundaries, not just someone who exists to accommodate their needs. Of course, this isn't always received well. Some people may react poorly to a woman's refusal, particularly if they're accustomed to her compliance. They might label her as uncooperative, difficult, or even rude. But those reactions often say more about the other person than they do about the woman asserting herself. People who respect and value her will understand that no isn't personal. It's a reflection of her priorities and self-respect. Saying no also dismantles the myth of perfection. Women are often held to impossible standards, expected to excel in every area of life without missing a beat. The fear of disappointing others or falling short can make it hard to decline opportunities or requests. But perfection is a trap, and striving for it only leads to stress and self-doubt. By saying no, a woman acknowledges her limits and embraces her humanity. She recognizes that she doesn't have to do it all, and that's perfectly okay. The ability to say no is empowering because it shifts control back to the individual. It's a declaration that her time, energy, and priorities are hers to manage, It's a refusal to be defined by others' expectations or to live according to someone else's agenda. This doesn't mean she's unwilling to help or collaborate. It means she's intentional about when and how she does so. Her yes becomes more meaningful because it's given freely, not out of obligation or guilt. Saying no is also a form of self-respect. It's a way of honoring one's values and boundaries. When a woman says no to things that don't align with her principles, she reinforces her sense of identity and purpose. She refuses to compromise on what matters most to her, and in doing so, she commands respect from others. People may not always agree with her decisions, but they will learn to recognize and honor her boundaries. Ultimately, the power of saying no lies in its simplicity and strength. It's a small word with a big impact. It frees a woman from the burden of overcommitment, protects her energy, and allows her to focus on what truly matters. It teaches others to respect her time and boundaries while reminding her of her own worth. Saying no isn't selfish, it's necessary. It's a declaration of self-love and self-respect, and it paves the way for a life that is authentic, intentional, and fulfilling.